Question 8.
Yep. So let's move into this one. So, which of the 40,000 denominations of the church is right?
Christian boys!
So according to a survey in 2019 from the Center of the Study of Global Christianity, at the time existed 33,000 denominations, and they estimated by 2025, so we're getting pretty close to that now, it'd be closer to about 45,000 denominations of Christianity globally. So this has led many to accuse the church of being so fractured and splintered that true Christianity is no longer distinguishable from the basically just plethora of theologies and ideologies within Christianity. Again, I just want to throw a little shout out. This is not how we would word this question, but we're going to attack it how it is worded. So, why is the church so divided, and what are they divided about?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that even the church gets mad about. Is like, we have 16 churches on one block, and all of them are preaching pretty much the same thing. So why are we all so divided? And that's where it gets tricky. Are we all preaching the same thing? Let's get into that. We are not able to drill down into every socio-political, economical, cultural, and environmental difference between every Christian denomination in order to fully explain why there's so much division within the church. But we can firstly acknowledge that this study was conducted very differently than many of us would think, even though this statistic is thrown around like it's like it's manna from heaven. The Center for Global Christianity defined the word denomination as any Christian group within any of the above differences. So any socio-political difference, any economic difference, any cultural, any environmental difference, and distinguished them all one from another. So for example, if I was a Catholic who lived in Kenya and my neighbor was a Catholic who lived in Ethiopia, because we live in two different countries, those are now two different denominations, even though we practice exactly the same type of Catholicism. That's immediately misleading. Because if all of these different denominations exist in more than one country, now they're suddenly two different denominations. In other words, the number is grossly inflated. A more accurate estimate is that somewhere in the range of 400 to 500 distinct doctrinal differences of Christianity exist globally. So distinct denominations in which there are actual doctrinal differences, it's only about 400 or 500 different denominations across the world.
Yeah. And then secondly, this survey also included things like Latter-day Saints, Jehovah's Witness, the Mother God cultists, anything that basically self-identifies as a Christian denomination, which we would obviously say no.
Yeah, we would strongly object to that.
Yeah. And so in order to qualify as distinctly Christian denomination in the true sense, we want to look at C.S. Lewis. So he coined the phrase mere Christianity in his book, or the core fundamental of what Jesus and the apostles and the historic church has taught, practiced, and adhered to throughout church existence. For example, the divinity of Jesus Christ, this is denied by the JWs. We also see the eternality, sorry, long day, of Jesus with the Father and the Spirit, denied by LDS. And then there's multiple others. You look at the Mother God Church, and that's very
They believe
wicked.
There's a whole other deity who's female, who's alongside God the Father and God the Son. Yeah. That is obviously a rejection of the fundamental doctrines of Christianity, and yet they self-identify as Christians.
Yeah, and we want to be so far removed from that I wouldn't even get them close to a denomination, and maybe some of them less than others, but especially the Mother God Church, it's just very horrendous stuff. So yes, this is another way in which this survey is extremely misleading to what the denominations actually look like abroad. So
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So rejection of the fundamental doctrines of Christianity should mean a rejection of being included as a denomination of Christianity. Mm-hmm. That's just our personal opinion. But I think it's backed up by most other Christians. To answer the question, which one is right, our personal conviction is that any and all denominations which hold to the fundamental doctrines of the faith, which we discussed in a previous video, which we can get to you guys if you want to see that, any of them who hold to those fundamental core aspects of the faith are quote-unquote right. But that's typically not the reason why the statistic is brought up. The reason it's brought up, if you're receiving this from an unbeliever, ask them if they have any specific question in mind, like any specific division that they're thinking of in mind, because almost certainly they're thinking of like, why do I have like a Catholic church on my street and a Church of God on my street? Like, why is there that separation? And digging into the specifics with that person is going to be way more important than giving them all this research. We just wanted to go to the trouble of explaining the 40,000 number is ridiculous. No one believes that there actually are that many denominations.
Well, you don't have to remember every single little point of this, but being able to just debunk the 40,000 may be able to at least get you in a talking point with somebody. Hey, that's completely
Inflated.
skewed. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and if the questioner is only interested in asking vague and generally accusatory, like using that kind of generally accusatory language, they probably aren't interested in the truth. So again, a lot of this comes back to who are you talking to? Now address that person. Mm-hmm. You can have the research, you can have all wisdom and all knowledge, but without the loving act of knowing what this person needs, it's all meaningless. Now, when it comes to church unity, Jesus had something to say about that.
yeah. So John 17:20 through 23. I do not ask for these only, but also for those who will believe in me through their word, that they may all be one, just as you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they also may be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. The glory that you have given me, I have given to them, that they may be one, even as we are one. I in them, and you in me, that they may become perfectly one, so that the world may know that you sent me, and love them even as you love me. So pray that there would be, and that we would practice this unity of the church to honor Jesus and the Father, because it's so important to Jesus. He's basically calling us to this. So I think the more that we work towards that unity and more work towards what God has set out for us, the more it will be compelling to those who don't believe, because they won't have to question as much. They'll be able to see that unity through us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a tactic of Satan to come in and say, like, I'm just going to make as much division here so that the Church of Christ looks like any other group in the world, just full of hatred and separation and division and anger. And what Jesus is saying here is that I'm praying for my disciples that they would be so perfectly one, and that all of the ones who come after them who believe would also be so perfectly one that it's obvious to the world that Jesus is from the Father. Because this kind of unity doesn't exist in the world unless it's divinely inspired. And I think that's something that, first of all, none of us can accomplish on our own. It's impossible. But second of all, if the Spirit is actually dwelling in us and we are walking in the gifts of the Spirit and the fruit of the Spirit, we should see a desire to put aside our differences and all worship the same Lord together. Now, when it comes to actually orthodoxy and orthopraxy and all that, all the different terms that get thrown around, yeah, that's where we can have loving, kind conversations with Christians who disagree with us on secondary doctrinary issues. But where we rest in our core heart attitude and our posture towards other believers of different denominations should be love and unity at all costs.
Yeah, and I think we've said this probably several times, but some of the most hateful comments we get is from other Christians. And it's just so sad, because it's like, regardless of if we disagree or not, that's fine. But you just showed a complete disunity to all those who are not believing. And they're going to question, whoa, that's how Christians talk to each other. So, that just goes back to the principle. We've got to walk out the way that Jesus has set for us.
In
and it's
wisdom
not going to be easy.
and in love, with gentleness and respect.